Hello, everyone. I'm Evan Schwartz, lawyer, law firm owner, and someone who's been spent over 35 years practicing law in both New York and in jurisdictions all over the United States.
And I'm Matt Conroy. I've represented people in jury trials, bench trials, and different types of litigation for over 30 years up and down the East Coast.
Welcome to Ask the Lawyers, the podcast where we answer your legal questions, no matter how big, how small, or how complicated.
We're here to explain your rights when it comes to being questioned by the police, taking phone calls, any kind of legal minutia, no matter how big or small. We're going to break it down for you in simple terms.
Could be divorce, could be landlord-tenant. It could be anything that you feel isn't fair or you haven't gotten an answer to and you didn't know where to go to for the answers. We're going to answer those questions.
And we're not going to stick to our specialties. Anything that's of interest to you is of interest to us. If it's legal, we're going to talk about it.
So think of this podcast as your one-stop shop for legal clarity. We're going to answer your questions and hopefully give you some guidance to where you can go next with your legal problem.
Enough with the intro. Let's get down to it.
Okay, but before we start, we have to read the disclaimer because we're rendering advice for entertainment purposes and not your lawyers. So the information provided on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction regarding any legal matter you may have. Watching this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship with any of the attorneys featured on the podcast. And with that, let's get started.
How can I create a legally binding contract?
Matt. So the first thing you should do is get yourself a lawyer. If you go onto the internet, you go onto AI, you can generate all kinds of contracts. The internet is filled with sort of some level of intelligence, but at the end of the day, to have a binding written contract, you need to have all the material terms. You need to have language in there that reflects the true intention of both parties. And a good lawyer is invaluable in helping you create a contract that's not going to lead to more problems down the line. Our office is filled and the courthouses are filled with breach of contract actions and partnership disputes and shareholder actions where people are fighting about a problem that they hadn't considered at the time they wrote the agreement. One of the values brought by lawyers who have been around enough is that they can anticipate problems that the client doesn't necessarily foresee, and you can come to an agreement between the parties as to what happens if X, Y, and Z happen, get that into the agreement, so in the event that it happens, the agreement is clear.
Yeah, and entering into a contract is not hard, and you can do it all the time. You know, you call the plumber to come fix something in your house. In exchange for a certain fee, they may say, we charge X number of dollars to show up at your house, and then we charge Y for how long we're there to evaluate what repair we're going to need to make, plus the parts, right? That's a contract. You hire a kid to mow your lawn for $50. That's a contract, right? So it's not hard to enter into a contract. It's just when you get into contracts that involve more significant dollars, more significant risk to you, that's where you need a lawyer that knows what they're doing to make sure that you're protected and that you have something in writing.
What does indictment mean?
What does indictment mean, Mr. Conroy?
So an indictment is a legal term that indicates that a grand jury has issued a criminal action against an individual. Either the federal or state government, county government will present evidence, documents, testimony to a sitting grand jury, and they will come back with what they call a true bill or an indictment on the charges that are being sought by the government. Based on the indictment, you then get an arrest warrant, and you as an individual could be arrested on the indictment.
Right. So if you're living in a particular state and you get a grand jury notice to appear as a grand juror, that is where you will sit with a group of other people and a prosecutor will present evidence to you and ask you and the group of people you're with to indict a person or a company for allegedly committing some kind of a crime. And that's pretty universal in most states.
And just, there are instances where, in the course of everyday life, people get arrested by the police at the scene of a crime. You initially are getting charged and brought to court and arraigned. And then there's a period of time where the government then has to take that matter, present it to the grand jury, who would then issue an indictment on the matter. And that's how the case proceeds. But initially, you could be, with some of the bigger cases, you might not know that there's a grand jury investigation. You might not know that you get indicted until the arresting team shows up at your house at 5 a.m.
Right. And a lot of that happens in federal criminal matters, especially federal white-collar criminal matters, where you don't know unless you get wind of it through someone that you're being investigated and may get indicted.
What constitutes a white-collar crime, and how serious are the potential penalties?
The best way to think about white-collar crime is sort of compare it to street crime. White-collar crime is it's like financial crime, mostly. It's business crime. It's crime involving theft of money in some way, whereas street crime is typically viewed as assaults, murders, burglaries, rapes. The sort of violent physical crimes against people is more often thought of as street crime, whereas the financial crimes are more of white-collar crimes.
That's probably true. Drug dealing, I think, probably falls into non-white collar crimes. But with white collar crimes, you see healthcare fraud, tax evasion, stock fraud, Wall Street type activities, Ponzi schemes. As far as penalties go, your white collar crimes are typically driven by the loss value of the case. And there are two components to that. The intended loss, which is the amount, for example, if you billed an insurance company for providing medical services that you never provided, the total amount billed is the intended loss. The amount paid by the insurance company is the actual loss, and the court considers both of those in the course of sentencing. And in the federal system, the loss is really a heavy driver of time when it comes to federal sentencing. And so oftentimes you'll see sentences in the federal courts on white-collar crime where the dollar value is in the, high, multi-million-dollar range, where people are getting 10, 15-year sentences. And people often look at that and compare it with state court manslaughter charges where you've actually killed somebody and end up serving less time. So it is important to consider that, in the white-collar world, the amount of money involved in the commission of that crime often drives the length of sentences.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say about it is typically, and there's a lot of exceptions to this, but typically your street crime is going to be prosecuted by your state and local government, and your white-collar crimes, more often than not, are going to be federal government. There's a number of different exceptions to that. You see in modern times a lot of violent actions being prosecuted federally as civil rights violations and things of that nature, or federal RICO conspiracies where there's an attempted murder or some physical crime. But typically, it's state and local government dealing with your street crime and federal dealing with your white collar.
You have domestic terrorism, and there are, the Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado, is a federal facility and not for the faint-hearted over there. But your state prisons are no joke, and there's, within the federal system, you have camps and low designation facilities that losing your liberty is never easy, but when you think of prisons and you think of violence and sort of being in cages, the prison camp system, although it's certainly not optimal, you're not necessarily bumping elbows with murderers.
Yeah, or locked in a cell with a cot with just you and another guy. For certain of the white-collar crimes in the federal prison system, they're a little bit like a not-so-pleasant summer camp, to put it a certain way, if that makes sense.
I don't know where you have to camp.
What should I do if my insurance company is denying or delaying a payment?
So the big difference between denying and delaying a payment, if your insurance company is delaying, there's a couple things to think about. One is, why are they delaying? And how much time do you actually have to potentially sue them if the delay is for too long? Are your rights completely at risk? If it's just that they're taking too long and it's frustrating, which we see a lot, it may not warrant getting a lawyer involved. okay? Because it may be that they're trying to gather information. It takes time. Every state has timing regulations about how quickly an insurance company is supposed to respond and what they're supposed to do. But that doesn't mean they're going to enforce those things and that you're going to get a legal remedy because the insurance company took longer than the state or local law required them to take. So it's really a question of understanding what's going on and maybe consulting with a lawyer as opposed to hiring a lawyer is the best there. As far as denying the claim, I'll let Matt weigh in on that.
Yeah, well, as to the delay part first, if you feel like your insurance company is just dragging a claim out, bells should be ringing in your head. And I can't tell you the number of times I have clients that come in and think that they have 6 years to sue an insurance company because they had a contract, breach of contract is 6 years. There are contractual limitation periods in most insurance policies that are less than 6 years, and those are binding in most cases. So it's important when your bells are ringing in the back of your head that this is taking longer, make sure you're not getting lulled to sleep on a contractual limitations period. On a denial, once your claim is denied, the insurance company has no obligation to do anything. You have to do something to get that moving. You should talk to a lawyer. You should do something, but don't just sit on your rights. You have to do something actively to pursue your rights in the event that your claim gets denied.
Right. And in a denial scenario, it doesn't always automatically mean time to file a lawsuit. We have so many times taken a look at what was going on and turned that frown upside down and got the insurance company to come in and get involved without having to file a lawsuit. So it's not as necessarily drastic. While it's not fun, it doesn't automatically mean lawsuit. And the other thing, just as an example, as sitting on your rights for a delay, in New York, the contracts of insurance are allowed to shorten the time frame to bring a claim for a loss under your insurance policy for property damage to 2 years. So it's not at 6 years. You have 2 years from the date of the loss. So if it was a fire or a water event or a weather event, you've got 2 years to file suit against the insurance company or get the insurance company to agree in writing to extend the time and go beyond those 2 years. And if you don't do that, you're now out and there's nothing you can do. So that's an example. There are some states that will allow it to shorten to a year. So these are things that, again, the bells and whistles and the warning lights need to be there.
And with property damage, water loss and fire loss especially, once you go through that loss, the whole process of restoration and the cleanup, the insurance company comes in, takes photographs. They want to take your examination under oath. They want to see, documentation to support the damages that you're claiming. These things just take time. And it's easy, 2 years seems like a long time. It goes fast because you spend 4 or 5 months just trying to get your property back together. At some, you might have a lawyer, you might not have a lawyer. And the next thing you know, you're bumping up on those 2 years. You have to do something. You can't sit on your rights.
How do I dispute the denied claim?
Well, the easiest answer to that sounds like shameless self-promotion, but talk to a lawyer. Because there usually is a way to dispute it. But, every time a potential new client comes in with an insurance recovery matter, whether it's property damage or liability or any type of insurance, every time I look at that, I'm looking first at the insurance policy and the communications that have occurred between you, the insured, and or your broker and the insurance company, right? To understand factually what's going on, to understand what the insurance company's looking at, what they're doing in analyzing the policy, to figure out what avenues have not been pursued, what avenues need to be built up, what things can be done to get that insurance company to pay that claim. And it's such a broad question. So it just starts with those analytics. And those analytics generally need to be done by a lawyer.
The communication between the insured and the insurance company are critical. We spend a lot of time looking at that because they oftentimes box themselves in. They take positions either with a reservation of rights or with a denial, and they're stuck with the basis in many cases. And so, we may look at it and say, look, there may be, coverage issues here, but the insurance company has taken this position and denied it for this reason. We don't think that holds water, and you're probably going to be able to to work with that claim. Absolutely.
How do I resolve a dispute with a co-owner or shareholder of my business?
I'm going to let Matt take that one.
Your contractual and your partnership relationships are driven largely by whether or not you have a shareholder agreement, an operating agreement, a partnership agreement. The written writing between partners or between shareholders, ultimately it's what sets out the rights and responsibilities of the people involved. If there is no agreement, or if it's just basically an unsigned piece of paper stuck in a black book that you ordered from Albany, New York state law often will govern the relationships and rights and obligations between shareholders or partners. So, if you're not sure, consulting with lawyers is super important. I mean, it's just, people oftentimes don't know whether they have an agreement. They have one that's not signed. They have one in the book. If you're having a problem, it's important to figure out early what your obligations are, whether or not, a lot of times people think that they're being unfairly treated or perhaps taken advantage of by a partner. When you have two partners, for example, which is oftentimes how these things happen in a business, you get, just through the natural evolution of a business, people take on certain roles and responsibility of somebody in the back office, somebody doing sales, someone who communicates with the clients, somebody's doing purchasing, someone does receivables. And over time, we've found, resentment builds between people who think I'm doing too much of the work. Someone's saying I'm generating all the business. Well, I'm here all the time. He's taking more work. It's the natural nature of sort of a business marriage. And people that have been in business for years and years and years in different businesses, you figure this out over time. And, when you talk to someone who's 70, who's been in 10 different businesses, those people know when you're going to work with somebody else, you got to talk about who's taking vacation time, how much people are getting paid, are expenses going through the business, who's going to do what, making sure that everybody's okay with this is what I do, this is what I make, this is what you do, this is what you make. Those are the sort of the successful examples of businesses and partnerships. But, again, back to the original question, when you think there's an issue with a partner, understanding what your rights are, either by virtue of having a signed agreement or by virtue of state law, those are things that a good lawyer can help you with.
Yeah, and communication with your counsel is really important to understand what's going on, to make sure you have whatever documents may or may not govern the issues at hand or the relationship that you have with your partners, the members of your LLC, whatever it is. There's going to be communication and documents and an understanding that a lawyer as an advisor is going to need to have in order to better counsel you, not just on what to do and how to do it, but whether or not you want to get into a lawsuit. Because once you're in a lawsuit with a partner, it has such a dramatic impact on your ability to conduct your business. Usually there's going to be financial strain. You're going to have legal fees. And it's all, in a way, they call it a business matrimonial because in a lot of ways it is.
No doubt.
It's highly charged. It's emotional. It's a financial pressure. And if there's a way to get home and dry without going through, a 3-year litigation war, that may be an alternative you want to consider, even if emotionally it doesn't seem good at that particular point in time.
Yeah. The employees are the kids, the clients are the 401k, and the office is the house. That's how it works.
What's your favorite part about working with each other?
I would say my favorite part about working with Matt is, without question, trust. I trust him completely. I have no concerns about what he intends to do, what his motives are. And then once you have that comfort and trust, then you can also appreciate, for me, how smart he is, how focused he is on client outcome and client results, and how much we just have a good time talking through the issues that we are always facing as lawyers representing clients. It's fun. So I have fun with him. I trust him. I respect him, and both as a lawyer and as a human being.
Yeah. So I've been here, I guess, getting on 13, 14 years, although we've known each other probably for 20 years. And from the time I got to New York, I always knew Evan as sort of an expert in insurance matters. And over the years, I've learned more about the subject, but I still feel like I haven't scratched the surface of what he knows. So the sort of, the high level of just understanding and analysis of complex litigation is, I haven't had a partner that understood sort of the nuances and complexities of client management, of the cases themselves, of sort of interplay between complicated case law. And it's been really fun to have somebody with a high level of expertise on a sort of case by case basis. But probably the biggest thing is that when it comes to our operation, I'm a product of my environment, which is, I've worked in small groups over the years, and I don't have great vision for a big organization, and Evan does. And so it's easy for me to just have him do all the heavy thinking and lifting on the sort of direction that the firm has taken over the years. And I just, I sort of give my 2 cents, but I just benefit from his vision on this. And that's not something that I'm good at, or something that I think it's just not my wheelhouse of skills. So I think that skill that he possesses to see things that I just don't see, are both fun and really, really valuable.
Thank you all for joining us. Hope to see you on the next one, which will be coming very soon. And just a reminder on the disclaimer one more time. The information provided on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction regarding any legal matter you may have. Watching this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship with any of the attorneys featured. Take care, everybody.